day, my body's sore, and I do not want to work anymore. Don't trust my boss, don't trust his numbers. If it was good for his math, I think he'd work me 60.
I've always loved the half-pint folk punk kind of slogans you guys have. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
But I'm kind of curious, you know, first, how did you bring the anti-folk into Nashville and how did it fit? This is two-pronged. And then second, what in your mind is this folk punk hybrid?
Anti-folk, I mean, the difference between New York and Nashville is it's so big, and it's kind of why I think we came here, because the thing about, I might more represent the anti-folk thing, which is that kind of like post-punk, ironic way of looking at things. It's, you know, it's reaction to, it started off as a reaction to the, not Dylan so much as that 60s like Greenwich Village folk scene, which still exists in New York and was, until they started sadly dying off at a certain point. But they're this like the snooty club of people who like know what folk music is, and so there's this whole, and that's in the West Village. So in the East Village, you have this whole group of kids who like know what anti-folk is instead. So they're very similar actually at this point. But I probably definitely come more from the anti-folk scene, like having grown up playing punk music in high school and grown up on punk. And so coming down here, where it's just like that's not even part of the conversation. It's just like everything is still fairly traditional in a lot of ways. And I think for me that was really refreshing. Because the whole ironic, jaded thing that happens in New York and Brooklyn, like, it gets really old after a while, and, like, kids will get up there, and the best example I have would be this guy, Lance Romance, and sorry for watching Lance, you're a nice guy, but I really don't like what he was doing musically. I mean, he was Berkeley trained, like, he was an amazing musician, probably, but the stuff he would do, he would get out this little keyboard, and he would, like, you know, hit 2 or 3 notes here and there, and sing a song about this, you know, cute little bowler girl, cute little... It sounded like that Monty Python Traffic Light song. Like, that was probably the most anti-folk thing I could think of. And that got very annoying after a while. And so to come down here where everything is professional...
Musicality is still really important here.
Totally.
Which is really nice, because, I mean, we're musicians and we really want to be able to make beautiful sounds without having... I don't know. We don't want to compromise anything, but we want to do something interesting and do new things, but at the same time, there is a tradition to uphold, I think.
Right.
So.
Yeah, in those specific ways, I feel like we did not fit in with the anti-folk scene at a certain point. Like, I wanted to write traditional good melodies, I wanted to, like, sing well, try to play well, and, like, construct good, crafted songs, and that didn't always work out, I think. And so down here, I think it seemed, down here it seemed different enough, but also in line enough with what was going on, that I thought it was a better place for it.
When you guys sat down and said, we want to do a folk punk duo, how did you imagine bringing those things together?
Well, what's funny is, I mean, when I grew up playing punk, and then like my last band broke up, and I was by myself, and I started playing solo folk music, I just kind of thought I left punk behind. And then like as I was playing, I kind of thought like, I'll call this folk punk. I thought it was kind of this funny thing to say. And then, you know, halfway through my time in New York, I met a guy who took me on the road, and like I learned that there was a folk punk scene. There was like there actually was a whole network of houses and community of kids, and they were like crusty-looking punk kids with dreadlocks and patches and the whole bit, but they were playing folk music, usually kind of like bah! And screamy and you know, very political a lot of times, like just bluntly like political fist in the air songs. And so I was like, oh cool, I can. This is like a whole thing. Like I felt a lot less crazy all of a sudden, and so now when we tour, I mean, it's less so in Nashville. I think we're trying to book more shows like this in Nashville and like combine it. But when we're on the road, there is a DIY punk network, and we'll play out there with hardcore bands or you know, whoever. But it's like a lot of, you know, community spaces and all ages spaces and bookstores and info shops that will play, and so it's almost more of a community thing, I think, than just a musical thing.
And, well, you could say it's somewhat political.
Very political, yeah.
Like the lyrics behind it, or even just like the spirit behind it. You know,
the ethics
even
of
if it's
how...
not like blatant in the song.
Let's talk a little bit about influences then, and we'll do it kind of individually to start. Dave, you talked about, you know, growing up on punk. I mean, so tell me, what were some of the influences at that stage, and then how have those kind of permeated into what you're doing now?
Okay. Yeah, I guess the whole folk punk thing is music too. I heard talk about music at all. But I mean, I grew up like in high school. I mean, I heard Green Day, and everything changed for me at that point. And I started a 3-chord punk band. That's what we did through high school. Like, I'd only buy punk records that were fast and 3 chords. Anything else was sell out. But then, you know, I grew up a little bit, and yeah, there was this point where I graduated high school and moved away, and I was living by myself, and so I got kind of into like more, you know, sad bastard music, and I heard Billy Bragg for the first time, and that was kind of mind-blowing for me. Like, to hear a guy playing, you know, it sounded like The Clash, but it was, you could hear the lyrics, and like, it was you know, it was emotional, it was about growth, and it was like just fist in the air political sometimes, and like the humor, and like I think I really started to understand like what a singer-songwriter could do at that point, and so that became my model for a long time. At the same time, I got into Tom Waits, which like also blew my mind as far as like, wow, you can do that with music. Like, you know, punk's pretty cool, but like, what if I made up my own drum set, and you know, and that kind of thing.
Did you ever look back? I'm sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned those two things, and those two guys influenced me too. You know,
yeah.
and I look back now and I go, wow, on the Rancid record they talk about breaking up the Billy Bragg
records,
and
yeah.
then I bought Punk-O-Rama Volume 4, and it's got Tom Waits on it.
I was so excited. I was like, holy shit, Tom Waits on an Epitaph compilation. Like, just like everything came together.
Yeah, it was just, those were great examples. Those they really kind of bring it full circle. But anyway, I mean...
No, definitely.
Yeah.
And that was my first window into like how, alright, so you can take that 3-chord punk rock spirit that I grew up in high school, and you can do something like totally crazy and artistic with it too. And that's kind of what I was running with for a while, like when I was singer-songwritery, and then on one of my first tours, there was a moment, my next probably musical epiphany after Billy Bragg and Tom Waits, was my first tour as a solo guy was 2 months by myself in a car, and so that was kind of like a crazy head trip of an experience. And by the time I made it from New York all the way to California, and I was like, I remember I got to Orange County, and somebody had given me Leonard Cohen songs from the room, and I heard Leonard Cohen here and there throughout the years, but like never really... I always heard like his later middle albums where it was like kind of weird, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I didn't really pay too much attention. I like Hallelujah, but you know, whatever. And then he gave me songs from a room. And so I was on this point where I decided like, if I turn off the radio for 6 hours and drive, what's going to happen? You know, like crazy things were happening. And then, so I put on songs from a room at some point like that, and it just, blew my mind entirely. Like, and the lyrics on that album, and like the songwriting, the melodies, like everything about it was just like everything I've been waiting to hear, I think. And so that kind of changed my lyric writing, I think, a lot. I mean, if Billy Bragg and Tom Waits, like what you can do with songwriting, then like Leonard Cohen was like, wow, you can put so much into a song. Like it's beyond politics, it's beyond spiritual. It's like a whole different level.
And what about you? What were some of the like foundational influences that made you do what you do?
Well, started out okay. Well, there were two different directions that I came from. Grew up with kind of Appalachian folk, country, that kind of stuff. Like, not I grew up in North Carolina, so that was like all around me. Bluegrass festivals every summer, blah blah blah. So there was that, and then also played piano classically growing up, and also got into classical voice as well growing up. So I had a lot of just like I got really into just early music, like Handel and Purcell and just all kinds of like really beautiful choral works, and as well as like a lot of newer contemporary works. So I just did a lot of that in college, and then on top of that, like in the folk and the pop, all that stuff, definitely was more influenced by like Gillian Welch and Emmylou Harris and all those like amazing female, Lucinda Williams, like just all these amazing female songwriters, and like just that do these. I started listening to punk when I met him. Really, I I listened to rock, but I didn't really like. Okay, I listened to Green Day. Yeah, who didn't listen to Green Day? I grew up in the 90s. He kind of introduced me to all that stuff, like people that you might not necessarily know unless you've met certain people, and it's a friend of mine, and it's a friend of a friend of mine, and this person's awesome, and then he's just like it just opens up.
Similar thing. Blackbird Rom is an amazing band like from Santa Cruz who has had a big influence on us lately, I think. And it's like it sounds like hardcore punk, but just done with a washtub bass and a banjo. I mean, it's incredible. Mixed
with like, traditional Celtic tunes.
And the most amazing washboard. You've never seen somebody play a washboard like they play a washboard. It's just like.
Yeah, so that's another thing is like just being influenced by the road and how many amazing musicians are out there just doing what they do.
Do you guys both listen?
Yeah.
Okay. Does the collaboration ever end? I mean, really, like, I mean, how is there a break?
I ask myself that.
I mean, I got to imagine it's run through your head a lot, and a lot of the conversations start, hey, what do you think about this lyric? And when new ideas pop in your head, it's pretty instantaneous. I mean, how does that play into what you guys create?
I mean, that's a funny question. Yeah, I guess we collaborate on almost everything we we do at this point.
Yeah.
Or we live together.
It's always around, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always like lyrics hanging out on a piece of paper somewhere, or like chords that have been jotted down. Like,
I think I'm happiest if there's like a half-finished idea to work on somewhere.
Yeah.
it
It's not
definitely
like,
always
why
feels
are we
like there's
behind?
something. There's always something in the
Yeah.
making right now. So I mean, it feels good because it doesn't feel
Right.
like anything's like stopped. But yeah, it's overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, because in between like working on music and songs, there's also like the managerial aspect of running the band, like all the booking and the promotion and making of merch.
Which we
and,
pretty much we have to do ourselves. So
yeah,
it's a lot of
it's a full-time job.
stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always pretty much. We get home from tour, and I'm either already booking the next tour or like planning it out to do so. And like the weeks before tour, when that tour is booked, then we're frantically making merch, and then trying to find time to record and write songs between. all
Yeah,
there's like the DIY thing like pervades everything we do, like with our packaging or. I mean, I don't know if the DIY thing I would say is entirely intentional. Sometimes like I could use some help, but like I mean, you book your own tour, you start your own record labels. I mean, people start zines and like
The more handcrafted the things are, the better, I think, just because people appreciate it more. And these days, when everything's available, Gillian Welch said everything is free now, and I think that's really true. And so, like, being able to go on tour and people see your music as like a piece of art, they're more likely to buy it because it's one of a kind and out of the box, I guess.
Right, they could download it, they could burn it, but if you make something that's like an actual art piece, like if you craft, if you make the sleeves or have vinyl, I mean, it's also, hand sculpture and something like that, like there's a reason to do it as an art piece.
I think it's definitely hard sometimes because people don't always take us seriously. I think half the time they're either like, oh, that's kind of cute, look at that little piece, oh, that's nice, honey, like, like that kind of stuff. But then on the other hand, I feel like sometimes people are just like blown away that we took that much time to make something, because it obviously took a lot of effort.
I mean, is it difficult when you're doing everything on your own and with little help? I mean, to see what the next step is.
No, it's a good question because it's something you confront and like. And I have that like 16-year-old idealist in the back of my head, but honestly, I'm telling that guy like I'm tired. I mean, if somebody, it was a funny. A friend of ours we met in Houston, who's in high school. He's writing a paper on folk punk for school, and he asked me, like, what does DIY mean to you? And my answer was, do you want to put my next record out? Because I need some help over here. I think you start from that because the thing about DIY is it's what you can start with. It means you don't have to wait to get discovered. It's practical. It's free and it's creative because you don't have to like wait for somebody to agree with what you're saying necessarily or doing to start doing it. You can build fans on your own. But at a certain point, yes. I mean, I would hope that there's going to be a point where we can gain some help in one of the facets, whether it's help with booking or else putting out the next record. I mean, I think before we put out the next record, I'm definitely going to do more shopping around of like. I mean, there are labels we can work with that we respect or. Some of the question is like, are we going to. Because there's stuff happening in Nashville, which is local and on a level we could approach, or there's like also stuff that's more in like the DIY punk community, and so I guess that might end up determining what direction.
It's interesting. We've been asked that before by like younger kids who definitely it's like their question is kind of tinged with this like, are you going to sell out? Like, are you going to be DIY forever?
That's why I'm like, you spent 15 years in the back of a kitchen. You know where I've been.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
How can Nashville help you, or ideally what would you like to see kind of manifest in Nashville that can help a DIY artist like you take it to the next step?
Promotion is probably one of the best things I can think of, because the Nashville music community is really tight-knit, I think, and so once you're out there, like, it gets easier and easier as you go. So that's, like, really, our goal has been just to play as many shows as possible here, and I don't know if that answers your question, but...
I think in some ways, I feel like what we're doing and what Nashville doing are different, but hopefully helpful. Like one thing that's been really inspiring is, we work at the Little Hamilton space. I don't know if you know, but it's very punk rock thing. It's mostly hardcore bands booked there. We book some folk punk shows there, but it's like a consensus run, all volunteer, falling apart building, just like it's supposed to be. But what's been cool is that like the Nashville scene is really into what they're doing. It's like they'll like they've taken on themselves to like put our concert calendar up every week and like they'll talk about our shows and it's kind of cool to be taken seriously like that. Like I think a lot of towns like
there's no other venue like it. It's all ages. I mean, there are some all ages places here, but it's hard to find. So there's no drinking. I mean, people bring their own. It's a BYOB kind of establishment, but yeah, there's no bar. It's all ages, which is awesome because it's like people like I mean, Andrew Jackson Jihad could play there, and well, we probably don't have the capacity anymore, but
It could have.
but the kids from Murfreesboro are gonna come out and like see that because there's nowhere else for them to go.
Yeah.
So.
But I really hope to see a collaboration between like what Nashville has going, which because it's so friendly and welcoming. It's not judgmental in some ways. If I think of like the LA, in some ways the structures in Nashville remind me of the LA scene more than the New York scene, except that they're friendly and non-judgmental, and so it's cool because you have that professionalism, but like they're not going to put you down for being involved with the Lily Hamilton fact. They're going to be like, that's cool, I'm glad that's in Nashville too, and they'll work with you. So hopefully, like whatever direction we go with things, it'll be some collaboration of like where we've been, the things we like supporting.
And
but,
it does attract like other DIY bands, and like they're really happy to play there because that's their goal too. So it's like perfect for bands that want to play there and the people that want to go there because there's nowhere else here for that.
Well, and you guys are in a unique situation because you don't really, I mean, you have your niche, but you don't have a clique. Does that make sense? I mean, you guys really kind of go across multiple genres and, and in terms of appreciation and sound. So, I mean, you got a lot of opportunities there, too.
Right, yeah, that's the hope is that it can be accessible to, I mean, if we can play like a hardcore show one night and then open for a singer-songwriter or a country thing the next night, I'm a very happy person.
Fantastic.
So make me rich and set me free.